Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode number 72 of Tough to Treat. This is Erica Mello, and we entitled it Herniated Disc or Fear of Sitting. And it was actually one of my patients who was told literally not to sit, like she could never sit again. Yeah, I was like, what? That's what she told me. So that was her belief, no matter what she was told. So how do you debunk this myth of not sitting, while at the same time really increase her ability to tolerate sitting postures? And I think that, a lot of times we really have to change context, change environment, introduce non-fearful positions with this type of scenario. And Susan and I really talk a lot about how to debunk this. And this literally was her main barrier to recovery, because she said to me, "Oh my God, I can't believe it. I can actually sit." you know, so changing the context and changing the environment really helps. And we talk about this a lot in the podcast, but changing the context, get the person on all fours, get the person into, for example, sitting, but doing some novel movement in sitting, or have them do a little bit of, like a wall squat, anything, just to change the context of the movement that is meaningful for them or fearful for them. In this case, fearful for her. We hope you enjoy it. And also, Susan and I are so thrilled with all the testimonials that we've gotten on iTunes and Spotify and Stitcher and YouTube. And we really, we're going towards that number 100. So we're going to put everybody who's left us a testimonial on any platform in a drawing. So every 2 weeks, we're going to draw somebody's name or handle. And we're going to give away a webinar that we're actually doing right now. We're in the process of recording it. We're going to give you that webinar free of charge. So if you have not left us a testimonial, we would really appreciate it if you do so. And we hope to really see you soon on the podcast. Thanks a million. Bye. Hi, everybody. This is Erica Mello and my wonderful co-host, Susan Clinton, and welcome to podcast episode number 72. We are climbing to 100, Susan.
Yeah, we're going to have a Jubilee celebration when we get to 75, right?
Right, exactly. And then what's the centennial is 100. Oh, my gosh. It's crazy. So I will get right to it. For anybody who's still listening to this as it comes out, we are in our 5th week here at home. So I hope our podcasts have given you a good learning experience during this time. It's certainly been a great way for us to connect and I really hope that you get a lot out of it. So
yeah, we can't predict what's going to happen on May 21st, but this is the day that it's dropping. So some of you may be hearing it on May 21st. We still wish everyone peace and love at this time.
Sure. For sure. Okay, this is a patient of mine she's 52 years old. She came to see me with right-sided low back pain, chronic, persistent, with a secondary issue of a right neck pain, which comes into play, which is why I'm mentioning it. And office worker here in New York, history is 2011, she quote unquote split disc. This is what I get, a split disc. I'm like, okay, it's probably not split. And I had to sort of debunk that whole thing. She couldn't sit for a long time. So I will tell you, Susan, she works for an investment bank here in New York City. She's in their, I believe, human resources department. She sits a lot. This woman didn't sit for 9 months. Didn't sit. She basically got a standing desk and stood the entire day. And she had several epidurals, and they did not work. I probably heard standard 3 that she got. And she was seen by a chiropractor here in New York City who gave her, she said, exercises that really helped. So she saw the chiropractor for 9 months. What I was able to get out of her, she did squats, lunges, and bird dogs. That's sort of the 3 standard from what she told me. She demonstrated them to me. And these exercises that helped her so often in the past weren't helping anymore. And I was like, well, if you haven't sat for 9 months, your back extensors might be, this is not normal, okay? She used to do, she was a runner and that was discontinued at the time when her back was bothering her. Now, bear in mind, this was over 8 years ago.
Okay, so
Woman
the
has
nine
not.
months of the 9 months of not sitting was 8 years ago, 9 years ago.
Yes, but she's still not sitting. I mean, she sits more, but she's still not sitting as much. She
Okay, but she started all of that in 2011.
Correct.
That's when she saw the chiropractor.
Yes.
That's when she did all the squats, bird dogs, and those things, and had the epidurals.
Correct. In 2011.
So okay, so that was that kind of at that time, and so then
yes,
what's happened over those last 7 years. Then go ahead.
Yeah, so she's still working, same place, and she's sitting a little bit more, but very, like, she doesn't sit. So when she sits, I watched her sit. She sits like she stands, like upright standing, like no softening in the chair. So that's how she sat. So she basically should have stood the whole time because she sat sitting like she was standing. So her past, besides that, she had no other major orthopedic issues. She's 6 months prior to when I saw her. She ran forwards and she fell and hit her head against a door, which caused her to have significant headaches and chronic right-sided neck issues, which was her secondary complaint. It wasn't bothering her much at the time when I did the initial evaluation, but she happened to mention it. So I'm like, if they mention it, it's important to them. She did have some gastritis, some digestive issues. Nothing, no incontinence, nothing, no sort of quote unquote women's health issues. At that point, I think she said she's 52. She was going into menopause at the time. She did have the only other surgery she had, this is the only surgery she had, was she had some varicose veins removed on her left leg in 2006. And then she was on turmeric, nothing else, no medications. And the main issue was sitting. What made her feel better was standing. That was it. Those are the two things. Sitting worse, standing better. She didn't have any imaging at all, ever. I think she must have before the epidurals, but not in the past 9 years. She has one 30-year-old son and two 19-year-old twins.
Okay.
So a gap there. She has been driving a little bit more. Other than that, that's what I got on the first visit. She sleeps on her right side, nothing else, and it does her neck pain and her back pain's on her right side. That was it. So the first thing I did was I just addressed the ergonomics first. I was like, you've got to sit more. So basically I started to ask her what desk she had. If she did sit, how long did it take for her to flare up? Sometimes it could be an hour, sometimes it could be 5 minutes. I think it depended on the time of day. I watched her do the squats. I watched her do the bird dogs. I watched her do the lunges, and it literally, she was just over recruiting all of her back muscles, especially with the bird dogs. I mean, and I explained to her what helped then it may have obviously helped you, but you've stood for so long now that your body has changed and your adaptability to the sitting posture, and any exercise that would help we've moved on from that. Is sort of the language that I used. And when someone's standing like that and they're over recruiting whatever it is, posterior chain, calves, glutes, back, you've got to introduce variability. So I tried to get her into sitting posture to see if she could slump into it. You just slump. She couldn't even do that. She couldn't even slump. I'm like, how do you drive? And she's like, drives like basically how she stands. So although she's sitting and driving, she's standing in her an anatomical position, so to speak. So a couple of the movements I did, I mean, the one thing I noticed in standing was, everything, her head was off to the right. She's right-handed, so she moused with that right. Head was off to the right, a little bit of a translation to the left in her thorax. Everything else, her pelvis looked pretty even. Everything else looked okay in terms of center of mass. I mean, I'm so big on my center of mass. I didn't think that she was really off to one side too much, except when I had her move into a squat, she shifted to the left. No particular reason. There was no injury on that right side except her back pain. Probably aggravated her back, and so she opted to move over to the left. In the first visit, what I did notice was, I'm just looking at my notes, she had a very overactive, abdominal cavity. Her IO or her EO, she had those, those rib flares that you see with those overactive abdominals. And I actually, in standing, I don't know if you have a technique in standing to really get in and check those lower abdominals from a pelvic. We can talk about that, but I had to get her on the table to assess that. But in standing was obviously, she had this sort of a little bit of a overactive abdominal cavity and a little bit of a right-sided bias in standing. Not, once again, it was pretty centered. And then I noticed some issues up in her neck, and that was the secondary issue she came in with. So I'll stop there and just let me know, and I'll tell you other things that I did. Do you have any questions about anything?
Yeah. Did you do a movement assessment? Did you have her bend over?
Yes.
And did that help? Did it make it worse? Was she able to bend over?
She was able to bend over, but she was not able to bend over in a way that you and I would think would be normal. So she went over like
with a flat back.
With a flat back.
Okay, so she's holding herself pretty ramrod straight all the time. Exactly. She's gotten the message somewhere to never bend. Is what what I'm hearing here is the message that she took home from all of this stuff that happened 9 years ago was never bend your back.
That's exactly right, and that is exactly what she told me.
So she's adopted the postures in all of the positions.
Yep.
To help that, and then so definitely over recruiting, and definitely over recruiting of the abdominal stuff. The GI distress that you said, the GI issue, what was that? Did she say?
No, she just called it some gastritis. She wasn't taking anything for it. She said sometimes her stomach gets upset when she eats certain foods. Mm-hmm. That really wasn't. I didn't get any more than that.
And she over recruits her abdomen, and you were seeing a lot of over recruitment of the obliques and the rectus. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did she have a little pooch in her belly down lower?
Like a pressure belly, a little bit. Yeah, she's pretty lean.
But down low, like
you mean like
below the belly button?
Belly button, yeah, a little bit.
So generally, what I see with people like this is that they're really their obliques may be over recruiting along with the rectus, but the deeper muscle system just really is. This is it's more of the upper, like the upper abs, the obliques that are over recruiting are probably around the diaphragm. The diaphragm probably is being held like a postural control muscle, has to in that position in order to hold it. It has to overwork, and so you end up with a lot of pressure going down low. And you can't really palpate deep muscles and all of that stuff. People say they can palpate the TA and different things. To me, it's just more of how does that abdominal wall cope with load transfer, which is what you were looking at, and you were seeing a lot of just kind of like holding tight and not allowing it to move. And it's kind of like she turned all the muscles on around the trunk and just really has held them very stiff and very long for a long period of time. Could be one of the reasons she has a little gastritis, because her GI system can't move. I mean, if you get, if your diaphragm's not working optimally as a respiratory muscle, and your ab muscles and back muscles are firing up to beat the band, there's not going to be a lot there. So it's kind of hard to say. I'm just a little bit curious as to if she has any other pelvic floor symptoms such as heaviness, fullness, heaviness in her vaginal area, if she's constipated, which can't imagine that she's not. To me, most people are until proven otherwise, which could be a big problem with her gastritis, because the pressure system in there when you're carrying a poop baby around isn't healthy for your lower system or your upper system. She wasn't over using meds or anything like that. She doesn't sound like she's super viscerally sensitive. So just from a standpoint that just how much does that drive back pain? It's hard to say if she's constipated and that's driving some of the back pain, or the back pain is driving constipation, or just the whole system is being told to not work because we've had the back pain for so long, we have to hold ourselves so stiff. There's probably 1,000 reasons why, but kind of digging into the movement system would be the first place I would go. We got to get things rotating here with her.
Absolutely.
She's not gaining flexion at all, and in fact, it sounds to me like she's really afraid of it.
Exactly.
Very, very much afraid of it, and doesn't want to access flexion at all.
Exactly. And that's exactly right. She goes, I was told not to sit and bend for years and I didn't. And I was like, oh, I mean, that's exactly right. She told me that was afraid to sit because whether it was a chiropractor or someone in her journey years ago basically said, you can't sit right now. And the poor woman has a job in an office. I mean, how can you not sit for a period of time? So debunking that and just basically giving her permission to sit, even though she wasn't sitting, quote unquote, optimally for right now, was okay. And I think that was half the battle. So what I ended up doing the first visit, I went over the ergonomics of everything, and I really spent time with her, like just making like a makeshift office in one of the treatment rooms and putting her in a chair and saying, go in and out, do an anterior, posterior tilt. You do something, right? I ended up getting her prone on a Swiss ball, just hanging prone on a Swiss ball, a small ball, just so she's 4 points on, and just getting her body used to that flexion in a prone position with a maybe 55 or 45 centimeter Swiss ball.
Yeah, with support, which is cool. What a great novel input to her system.
Yeah.
To allow her to have support to, kind of ease herself down into that position and not have to it's just a different way of introducing flexion into the system, which is, brilliant for people with over recruiting, kinds of issues, because they really can use that ball to help them just let go for the first time in a long time. Just really be okay with being in a new position, but not one that they would consider slumping. Because those words matter and they make a difference in how people feel, but we're introducing it in a nice passive way, which is what slumping would be, just a kind of a letting go, but in a different position, and she was already used to the hands and knees. So I'm hoping I know where you're headed with the translation of that, but go ahead.
She has a ball at home, so it's like perfect. That's a great way to hang and do some breath work. And so she did that, and I gave her a child's pose, and then I did the ergonomics. That was what I did the first visit. It's like, do that at home, do some child's pose, and I gave her permission to sit, okay? And I said, just give her permission to sit. And I said, if your back is bothering you, and I'm reluctant to give people like belts or support, but I felt with her, because she's, I have a belt at home, should I use it? I said, you can try, you can certainly try it. And I did some compression patterns to see which look better in a squat position. And I did that. I said, you can try. I'm not sure that's going to help, but by all means, try. So she did. So she went home with, perhaps putting the belt on, the ergonomics changes, the prone over the ball, and the child's pose. Then she came back probably, I don't know, 2 weeks later. And I don't like to I like to get them in quickly the first couple of visits, but she works downtown, I'm in midtown. It was just one of those things. So she couldn't get here. So she came to tell me that changing the ergonomics at work was extremely helpful, and the belt also did help. I was like, great, perfect. Then what she started to tell me, which is in hindsight, she's sitting more. So what started to bother her now? This is just second visit. Her neck. Because she's sitting more.
She's in a different position.
Exactly. She's like, oh, my back feels better. And I'm like, oh, okay, And
but now I've changed the base underneath my neck.
Right. So I'll quickly go through, because I saw her for about 4 or 5 visits. I did, I won't go through the neck eval, but, I did work on her neck. She did hit her head against the door, had headaches. I did a lot of work up in the upper neck and up at COC1, did some manual work, nothing, I'm not going to get into the specifics. And so I ended up also having her do some dynamic movement on the table, similar to what we were talking about in one of our Facebook lives, having her lie on her back and just do some novel movement with her head, do a single arm lift on the right, single arm lift on the left, do some reverse flies, do some lower trunk rotation with head rotation. That was the second visit for her neck. So she went home, and then she came back for the third visit. This is what she said, Susan, you're going to laugh. So I did some manual work, and I did basic movement patterns with neck rotation and lower extremity movement. She said the neck was significantly better. It was, quote unquote, life changing. That's what I wrote in my notes. And I'm like, looking back at what I did, going, what did I do? Excuse me. And a lot has to do with the movement of the whole system.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's the neural
Just giving
tension.
her position to move, the neural tension, just the holding a
Right.
new input to the system started to wake things up and change things. Plus, I'm sure that, you're not going over all the things that you talked to her about and reassured her with, but you had talked earlier about, how long can you sit before it really starts bothering you?
Yes.
And, so you got variants of answers, but I'm sure you spoke to her about, well, let's see, if you could sit more for that length of time that it doesn't bother you,
yeah.
And, so those things are important, and getting people to trust their body and pay attention mindfully to the signals. She's just basically gone with what people have told her for 9 years and hasn't really listened to her signals.
Right.
Just kind of like, oh, that's going to hurt. So therefore, when I sit, it hurts. So I have to get up again. Yep. I'll just stand up because it hurts. Not really ever kind of mindfully going, I don't know how long I can sit. I never thought about it that way. I just know I have pain when I'm sitting, but they're never paying attention to, actually, I can sit pretty comfortably for about 30 minutes.
Yeah.
I just never thought about it. They just think about, oh, but it hurts. So they forget that they were comfortable for 30 minutes. They just think sitting, pain, back up, I go to standing.
Right. That's their path of least resistance.
And, if you're afraid of it, then it's kind of like, whoop, pain equals harm. Yep. And, like I said, you're kind of not really talking about the trust you gained with her and giving her that self-efficacy of mindfulness with her movement pattern and things like, but you did, with the sitting, because I know you did it when you told her, wear the belt, see if it helps. There's no harm in it.
Right.
And, I don't know if it's going to help or not. All it is a test retest. If it feels comfortable for you to try, go for it, but eventually the belt went away because then she started feeling better with other things.
I know.
So, but you were building self-efficacy with her, like she wanted to try it. Don't say don't try it, it won't do any good, it's a waste of time. Just, if they've got one and they want to try it, just like, okay, let's go for it. Let's just see. And but you're, again, mindful, does it really help or not? Do I feel different when I put it on? So her nervous system is paying attention to something different than never sit, never sit, never sit, never sit. Do all these exercises even if they don't make you feel better.
Yes.
It
puts her focus somewhere else other than, my back muscles, or I'm sitting how I stand. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. She was very aware of that. I mean, this person's is a highly intelligent woman who, and she's like, I really sit how I stand. And so she was aware of that. And I think I did spend some time talking about that, but patients say to me, oh, should I wear Spanx or should I wear a belt? I'm like, well, if you have one, try it. I mean, I'm not you, right. So I have no problem doing that. So when she came back, after saying the life changing with her neck, I was like, oh my God, I've seen her twice. I've done the back of the neck and I'm like, oh gosh, I just can't fall down that rabbit hole of treating every body part that hurts on her. So she was sitting more. I was like, okay, if I needed to treat your neck to get you to sit more, then that was worth every minute I spent on your neck. And so she said, to quote, and I had to debunk her, she's like, I'm trying to sit better. I was like, well, there's no better.
but at least you're sitting differently than you were.
Exactly. Differently. That's what I said.
We've got more variability in the movement. Now, do we know if that makes a difference or not, or if it's actually just being mindful about it?
Right.
And doing it differently. We don't know where the input, which is the input that triggered. But I'll tell you, listening to her story, the self-efficacy you built in her was amazing. Because you let her really run the treatment sessions. Yes. I want to try Spanx. Go ahead. Because I bet you $1,000 that all through this 9 years, people said, don't do that, it won't help.
Yeah.
That's just not good for you. Don't do that. That's just going to make you do this. Don't do that. Don't do that. You're probably the first person that said, let's do it. Why not?
Try it. Right.
Let her give her the ability to retest what's going to happen. Yeah. Because what you created with her, like I said before, is that mindful ability to feel her body again. I'm telling you, with highly functioning, cognitive, intelligent people, when they get wrapped up in their day and their highly intellectual work, they do not listen to the signals from their body. They extinguish it. That's how they're such high functioning, intelligent people, and they have to learn how to do that again. Yeah. And because it was so scary, and it, she figured out another way to do it, she just blanked it out and stood all day because she could get her work done, and I'm sure her work's important to her, probably very important to her. So, I think that's amazing because she learned to kind of like start getting curious and start and then she came to you and admitted, before she was kind of like, well, and there's this neck thing going on, but now it's like, oh.
Yeah, it was interesting, the pattern too, because it was
Yeah.
standing, and then she sat more, then the neck bothered her, the neck's not bothered, now she's sitting more. So it was almost like a little loop there, right? So on the third visit, I ended up, so I'm not sure when I'm looking at my notes. In the third visit, she was saying, of course, this is where, this is where what's coming. Turning over in the middle of my bed at night, it bothering me now. And I'm like, of course it is, because you're sitting more, and that's the rotation. So what that particular visit, I did do some just some manual work in her, because she still had that gripping sensation in her psoas and her abdominal cavity, and I did just do some self releases in through there with movement as well. I actually got her in sitting, and I checked her rotation, and I noticed she was quite limited. So I ended up doing just some it's not a mobilization with movement, but like a release with movement, and just having her turn and me breathing into the armpits and side bending, and then rotation and side bending, and let's do a flexion. It was like, very dynamic. So that's what I did on the third visit, and I did a lot of that, actually. I'm looking at my
very dynamic and very patient-centered, patient run.
Yes, control.
For this person who has never been able to figure out, who really wants to participate. This is, right off the bat, this is what I'm hearing, is this person wanted to be, she's tired of people telling her what to do. She wants to be part of it. Exactly. She wants to help figure it out. And, you're just really building her self-efficacy all along. Like, you can do this. You don't need me to have my hands on you. It's great to guide you and teach you. But this is something you're taking on out there to the world. And, with the next stuff too going on, I imagine there were fixed gazes and other things that were happening. So that whole system was just being held for many, 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 many reasons.
Yes. And no wonder the neck pain.
Yeah. And you were just kind of, sure, she had an injury, but, then, the system knew to say to it, because it did it with the back. Perhaps maybe the system said, let's don't move the neck either.
Yeah, it's true. Also,
because we learned the back hurts, so we don't move the back. So now the neck hurts, so don't move the neck either.
Yeah, but also that you bring me, when you said the gaze, it brought me into mind. When she's standing, she has a different gaze at the computer than when she's sitting. So when you can't just all of a sudden, I'm going to change my gaze. No wonder her neck started to bother. Her headache started to get her, right? Her vision, her vision and everything changed, and how she looked at the screen. Her center of gravity dropped, right? So, and what was also interesting with her, and you mentioned sort of giving her control. Her choice was taken away from her by someone telling her, "I can't, don't sit." Imagine being told not to sit, and I don't have a choice. So, and so when she got the go ahead, she was like, "Oh," and so she really ran with it. So I did a lot of active stuff with her. I had her go on her hands and knees, same thing, getting under the abdomen, doing some release work there. I had some, rock backs back and forth in the thorax, doing some, honestly, just breath work, lateral decompression, just doing a little bit of intercostal soft tissue. Honestly, I was literally just moving, having her move. If I felt something turn on under my hands, or I didn't feel right to her, we stopped. We did some breath work, and we moved again. So it was really more active. It was hands-on in the sense that I was touching her, but I was facilitating better movement for her and letting her use certain muscles that she wasn't, quote unquote, used to using. I also had her do facing the wall, my favorite exercise, just hands on the wall, just do wall squats to mimic the seated position. I had her do them in different hand positions. So hands here and squat, then hands to the right and squat into the left side, hands to the left, squat into the right side, just to introduce the rotation into the system. And we have some Pilates equipment, so I ended up having her just going onto the big Cadillac and doing some roll downs against gravity to get her more of that flexion in the thoracic spine. I did that quite a bit, actually. And then I had her do on the, like, it's called the box, the Wonder Box, I think it's called. I had her sit and just literally have her push down on the springs and had her just do some slumping and sitting, just mimicking the sitting posture while moving her legs, because we have the Pilates equipment there. So I did that.
How do you get them to do roll downs at home?
Ooh, that's a good question.
What do you do? What do you do?
Sometimes if they have, like, she had we have a very thick gray band, which I cut for her, and I had her wrap it around a fixed chair, and I had her hold it and just do a little bit of a roll down. That's all. That's the only thing I could think of.
Yeah, that's what I usually do. The same thing. I have different colors of Theraband and wrap it on the doorknob. And shut the door and have them put their feet up against the door.
Yes, like,
because as they roll back, the feet are going to come away anyway, because it's just kind of the way it moves. But it kind of is nice because they can pull against that. So that actually is a different input to the system again, like what you were talking about, just learning to just drape over the ball was one thing. But now what you're actually doing is using that resistance with her arms out to pull back. So she's having to use she's using her abs, everybody. It's not a no-no to use your abs, even if they over-recruit. Yeah. It's using them in a different reason, in a novel input. So her abs were actually working probably correctly or in a new coordinated pattern. So they had to turn on, but they also had to begin to lengthen in that turned on position as she goes all the way back.
Yes.
Because we can't walk around with our abs not working either. I mean, that doesn't do anything. But I like that because that was a great way to get her to start to be a little bit more mindful. Where are you bending from? Where are you over bending?
Yep.
What's happening to you? How do you feel with it? And then you've got the band to kind of help assist them coming back up. So now all of you who are getting mad at me about overworking abs, the band is actually assisting the concentric part, which is nice, because then it can become kind of a full-blown kind of lengthening, forward, with concentric abs, but a lengthening of those back extensors, because the back extensors are not all or nothing. They have to learn to do the lengthening piece.
Yes, I agree. I love that exercise.
Yeah, and this is the other thing that I love about what you did with the squats, is because you were introducing flexion, side bending, and because in the lumbar spine we get side bending, or we get flexion through side. Side bending is flexion on one side. Sorry, I messed that up completely. Side bending is flexion on one side. So by having her rotate, one side was going into side bending, which was flexion. The other side was lengthening. So you not only were you having her flex, but you were having her lengthen on the other side. So she was getting both things going. So both muscle groups couldn't work together at the same time doing the same activity. One had to go longer while the other one went shorter. The other one went shorter while the other one went longer. And she was doing it in combination with hip flexion and knee flexion and feet flexion under a loaded situation. So I love that, because those are all great loaded ways to help her, because she has to sit and stand a lot.
Yeah.
So the passive stuff is great to begin with, and a great offloading after she's been working all day or driving in the car. Those are just amazing things, but you were really giving her things that were going to change her in loaded postures where she has to live all the time. She can't lay in bed and work. I guess she could if she had to, but you were really meeting her where she was under the conditions in which she was having to kind of cope.
Right. And it gives her the variability. What I wanted to do is introduce more movement, sort of trick the brain in the sense that, yes, you can squat, you can flex, you can do roll downs. You don't necessarily have to sit and slump. I mean, and get that sort of that neurotag, in active in the brain. Right. So I did send her home with that particular exercise, and also just hands and knees, sitting back, things like that.
Yeah, and she was used to doing hands and knees because she'd done bird dog before.
Exactly.
So you took something that was helpful once upon a time and said, let's change it.
Yep. And I do think that the ergonomics was very key with her, and just doing very targeted, not that I like to target things, but because of her fear or belief system and her choice, I wanted to really focus on the lengthening and shortening and flexion part of the program for her. So I ended up doing a few other things in that last visit, the the last time I saw her, actually. I did have her, stand and do some, I call them bow and arrows, like some rotation, and have her, doing a little squat with rotation. It's very similar to the release work I did, but I wanted her to sit and just, or not sit, squat and just take a little ball and rotate, and to the right, to the left. There's many different things I added. I added to, like, a pulley, like her kids were holding on to one end of the band, and I had to do a pulley reach to induce some rotation, just in standing, because she does still stand, okay, at the end of the day. But
and it's okay to stand.
Yeah.
You just don't want her to be a one-note Mary.
Right.
No, we don't want her to have to stand always and never ever sit. We don't want somebody to sit always and never stand.
Exactly.
But I like that, because she does need to stand, and it's probably really healthy for her to stand to sit, to sit to stand, to stand to sit, to do a variety of stuff.
Yeah.
Around her work life, and just for her own movement system health.
It's really
well too.
Yeah, what was really interesting is, I just looked at my notes. When she was doing, when I had her squat, I had her do the very narrow base squat. She looked pretty good. When she widened it up, it looked worse. And I was like, and I just noted it down and didn't really, it was like a sort of a test for me. But she probably stood. I have no idea how she was standing. Probably she wasn't standing in a sumo squat, and I doubt she was standing with a very narrow base. But when she narrowed her base up, it was almost like Susan. She narrowed her base up, she stood straight, and she felt okay. But when she widened her legs, her base of support, it gave her body a little bit more options, and she didn't really look as good. So it was just something I checked.
Interesting. Yeah, I'd have to chew on that one for a while.
Yes, as well.
But again, this stuff is so contextual.
Yeah.
That you can't hang your hat on, So what do we say? Is this a neural tension problem or not? Who cares?
Right.
Right. I mean, it's great to give something a name and call it that, but you were finding, to me, the dosage that this person needed was movement in a different way than she's ever done it before.
Yep.
Because flexion to her meant sitting slumped, and she wasn't going to do that. She was afraid of that. She's terrified of it.
Yep.
But you were introducing, but you started dosing the sitting, the time. Yeah. So time was the dosage and movement was the dosage, not can you extend your knee without it hurting? Can you bring it back down? How far can you go? Let's go back and forth 100 times. Now, does it feel better when you do this? For you, it was more like dosing time, dosing activity, and really trying to get that novel input so that her system could learn to re-coordinate and change those things without the fear of, like you said, without ringing the neurotags.
Yes, exactly. And so the last visit I saw her was, I had her do some, hug a ball, just take hug a ball.
Flexion.
I had to do a wall, down dog on the wall, and things like that. And she asked me, she's like, is it okay to do crunches? I'm like, sure.
Absolutely.
Do crunches? Absolutely. So
here we go again. So the muscles need to learn to work in a coordinated fashion.
Right.
And you might be real surprised what over-recruiting muscles do when we give them something new to do.
Exactly.
And so how do we know? Give it a try. See what happens. What if she starts leaking with that? Well, then you'd have to back off and say, okay, now we got to figure out how to get the other end supported with the other stuff that we're doing. But, this person wasn't having any of those dysfunctions.
No.
At least not symptomatically that anybody can tell.
Yeah.
And, so it's, it's not the spawn of all evil to do crunches. And, especially even if you have over recruiting muscles, this is, again, one of those things, let's test and retest, but she needed to flex.
Yeah. She literally.
So there's nothing, as long as it's not bringing the symptoms on and, doing other, I would just have her watch out for some other things. Like, let me know how you feel when you do them.
Yes.
Let's see what's happening. Let's see how you feel. Is anything changing? Because you're teaching her that mindful piece again.
Yeah, it's so funny. I think that a lot of people ask permission to do crunches. Why does everyone want to do crunches? I think it's funny,
It is funny. They all just say, it's kind of like that rite of passage. I can do 100 sit-ups in, however many minutes or but it's also interesting because there's so many of the female population that has been warned against it, especially with pelvic floor dysfunction. And the newest research that's come out on intra-abdominal pressure changes, lying flat with your feet held and doing a full-blown sit-up has less increase of intra-abdominal pressure, significantly less increase of intra-abdominal pressure then a lying Valsalva, a standing Valsalva, and stairs.
Oh, interesting.
So breath holding when you get in and out of bed, breath holding on the potty, and having to cope with stairs, especially under a load.
Interesting. That's
and guess
really
what all of our clients are doing? I'd much rather them, so it is interesting, but it's some of the newest stuff that's coming out, some of the stuff we've warned people about.
Yeah.
It's not really maybe as problematic as some of the normal everyday activities that they're doing.
I know, it's
that we're not helping them cope with.
I know. And that's a great point. And so with her, basically, this was December, right before a holidays, and guess where she was going over Christmas? Italy, 6-hour plane ride.
There you go.
And she came back and she was fine. And I was just like, that was that. So I've seen her on and off since then for different things. But that, I just, once you give somebody the permission to do something, it's amazing how our bodies are just, and our brains are so plastic. And that's why I wanted to talk about her today, because I mean, she goes from standing and then riding to Italy and more than 6 hours, like 8 hours from New York, to being okay with it.
Yeah. And the cool thing is that, the backstory here that I keep bringing up all the time is the therapeutic alliance you built with her.
Yeah.
That's what got her over her fear, was the fact that you listened to her and believed her and brought her into the conversation and made her a part of it, rather than you telling her this, you can't do this and you can't do this and don't do that and that was wrong and this is right and here's how the nervous system works. And they don't care about any of that stuff. They just want to know, can my back get better?
Yeah. Nice.
And and you kind of just like right in there with her story with her and kind of helped her begin to see things a little differently and showed her different ways that she could move that would be like slumping without making her just go slump. That wasn't going to work for her.
Yeah, for sure. So,
and I think that's amazing. That's a great story.
Yeah, she's a nice,
great
lovely
story.
person.
Yep.
Yeah, they're all great, but she's I mean, this was an interesting one for me because I enjoyed seeing her tell me I flew for 8 hours and then I felt better. And anyway, so that is that. And thank you everybody for listening, and enjoy. And please opt into our website, toughtotreat.com. We've got some great things coming out and some more PDFs, and just
pop we're Facebooking living.
Yes, we're Facebook living.
Fun Facebook lives. We've had some people come in and ask questions. We'd really like for you all to come in and ask questions, or even get onto the Facebook page and tell us what you want to talk about. Maybe we should do something like Ask Us Anything. I know there's another Facebook group that's doing that. I don't mean to steal their words, but
oh, I like that.
Ask us about, what's tough for you to treat, and, or you have a particular subject that you want to talk about, and, let's get people on, and maybe we can even invite some people in that can give us a different perspective as well. It's kind of like, some other things. So we're just kind of letting this evolve and bubble up as all of you want it to do. And we're happy to be there and do it with you.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks,
you,
Erica.
Everybody. Thanks, Susan. Bye.